It's your boy Gsluke here for our ownership reaction for this week's US Open. We'll be touching on my top 3 fades and sleepers for GPP contests this week, aka the guys that I think are being the most overhyped, my fades, and of course the overlooked diamonds in the rough, my sleeper picks. They're going to help you get some leverage on the field. It could potentially be those low owned plays that you need for these large field contests. This is arguably the most important video of every single week because this is where we take the game theory aspect of DFS into mind and really start to act on our projections. I mean, for the first few days, we're just trying to get a feel of how the golf course will play. Some of the people that maybe model better than others, but Tuesday and Wednesday, those are execution days where you're actually getting that edge over your opponent. So a lot more to consider here in this video, a lot to talk about. So let's go ahead and hop right on into it. Alrighty, we'll start with our fades this week as per usual, and the fade is going to be Rory McIlroy, somebody who won us quite a bit of money last week, but unfortunately for Rory, he tends to struggle at major championships where you have firm and fast conditions. If you look at all of his performances, or at least wins in these large field events, it's usually with a score past -10, something in that -10 to 20 under par range. When it's a single digit winner, or perhaps even an over par winner, like we might see this week at Brookline, that's not really where he's found his success, and he's been the biggest self-critic in that category. A lot of the reason for that is his driving accuracy. Typically, when these golf tournaments get extremely difficult, not just kind of difficult, like something in that 10 to 20 under par range, it's because off the tee, it's almost impossible to hit fairways. It becomes an up and down fest, and for as prolific as a ball striker as Rory McIlroy is, he's not as prolific in those short game categories. So for me, he's the highest owned play on the slate, at least per my projected ownership right now at 20%, and he's not twice as likely as somebody like a Scottie Scheffler, a JT, or even a Jon Rahm to succeed. And while he might be, one of the better modeling picks this week, you can see he's number 1 across the board. There's a reason why he's chalk. I just don't see him going out there and winning 2 weeks in a row, particularly in a setup that doesn't play into his skill set. Now, if we take a look at the metrics, they're beautiful for Rory, right? It's the reason why we played him last week, somebody I considered betting outright. But if there's any one category where he's kind of struggled of late, it's been with the putter and the around the green play. He was gaining close to 3/4 of a stroke per round around the green just a few weeks ago. It was gaining even more significantly with the putter too. So obviously last week, little bit of a downturn in both of those categories, and in general, the more and more of a sample size that we give Rory, the more and more you're going to see that come to pace, right? Only gaining about 0.2 strokes per round with the putter over his last 50 measured rounds, and you can see the approach play also comes down to earth over that sample size. So it's really hard to fade somebody like Rory. It's, obviously trying to nitpick at somebody who's got a nearly perfect game, an elite level player, but when he's going to be twice as owned as everybody else up top, it makes him a relatively straightforward fade, somebody that I'm just keeping out of my player pool. So if you look at the recent form, if you look at the shots gain metrics, it's going to be a really tough fade to make. But if you take a more historical approach, a more long-term approach when it comes to these difficult tracks, he has not had the best track record, and that's what I'm going to go off of right here. So more of a long-term versus a short-term type of argument, and I'm certainly siding on the long-term side. Next fade we have is Joaquin Niemann at $8,900. My main concern here is first off his putting on POA, where he's nearly 0.6 of a stroke worse per round on POA than he is on most other surfaces, and also the approach play. Even though he's been in pretty decent form, obviously the top 5 finish at the Memorial, just a marginal gainer off on approach, around the green, just a marginal gainer. And of course, Nick Faldo every week would make you think that Joaquin Niemann's the best around the green player of all time. He literally always talks about how he's like the best all around the green player. He's never been good around the green. He's never been elite with his shots gain metrics. Nick Faldo is just full of shit. I hate to have to, call someone out for that, but it is what it is. He's always been a middling or even mediocre around the green player for his career. So don't let somebody like Nick Faldo just, kind of blatantly lie to you about this player's around the green play. He's never been that solid. His approach play has been very inconsistent of late. And just from the pure stats perspective, that's not what we want this week. We want guys that are going to be extremely precise with their irons, but also going to be able to get up and down when they inevitably miss. I mean, tiny greens out there. They're firm and fast. Up and down play is going to matter this week. So $8,900. I'm at just 14% owned right now, which I actually think is going to be a little bit low. I would not be surprised whatsoever if by the end of the week, the Chilean's closer to 17, even 18% ownership, because it makes sense from a comp, right? You look at Genesis, right? Obviously one over there on the West Coast. Just played well at Memorial just a few weeks ago, right? Those are two golf tournaments where it's not going to be nearly as difficult as a U.S. Open. I know they're more difficult than the average PGA Tour track, but this is a completely different level. And if you take a look at Joaquin Niemann and major championships, I mean, outside of the PGA Championship, nothing really to go off of, right? You can see it was a top 25 finish at the PGA, so obviously kind of fell off over the weekend. But outside of that, it hasn't been anything all that flashy. His major championship record has been very much so hit or miss, and it's been a lot more misses than hits for his career. So kind of similar to a Rory McIlroy, I just worry about his skill set in this type of scenario, especially at this type of venue. And at $8,900, somebody that I'm going to be avoiding in my pool. And now for the last fade, we have Sam Burns, who is on an absolute heater. He's completely mispriced, and that's why he's going to be extremely chalky. He's somebody who I have at 18.4% projected ownership, but I would not be surprised if he came in over 20%. A lot of that just due to the pricing. Of course, the shots gain metrics are on another level for Sam Burns. I mean, with the win, all of these top 10 finishes, you'd expect him to be gaining across the board. But kind of similar to a Rory, we expect this guy to win when it's a shootout, right? Something in that, let's say 10 to 25 under par range. When you have a single digit winner, he's the furthest from my mind for somebody that's going to win that event. And the issue is the off the tee play. He's not the most accurate driver. Could certainly get a little bit squirrely with that accuracy from time to time. His around the green play isn't always all that reliable. If we take a look at the last 50 measured rounds, you can see he's just a marginal gainer in that category, and that's despite being at an absolute torrent stretch of golf. So in general, kind of similar to a Joaquin Niemann, there's just guys I like a lot better in this category. Just players like a Daniel Berger that are a lot more consistent, a little bit more precise than somebody like a Sam Burns, who is going to be extremely powerful, right? At golf courses that are birdie fests, that are wide open, where you can really bludgeon it to death with your power. He's somebody that I'm always looking at. I mean, Sam Burns is an extremely high upside play. He's one of my favorite plays on the board. I mean, pretty much regardless of the slate, just not at this type of venue. It's a U.S. Open. It's a completely different mental game and physical game from all the rough they have to deal with, these fast, firm greens, just a different ball game than most weeks on tour. So at $8,300, I expect him to be extremely chalky this week and going to be somebody that I'm fading for an ownership reason. And now let's head over to the sleeper picks. And for Scottie Scheffler to be a sleeper pick is ridiculous. I mean, last week I didn't play him because I expected it to be not the perfect setup, right? It was a relatively short golf course. It had rough like we're going to have this week. It's just, I like Justin Thomas a little bit more. And obviously that pivot paid off. But now no one wants to play Scottie just because he finished in the top 20 at an 18th place finish. Is that not enough for people? And I know, in large field GPPs, that wasn't going to win you the $50,000 or the $150,000 last week. But in smaller field stuff, that was more than enough. So, if he's going to be anywhere close to 10% owned this week, I'm going to be all in on Scottie Scheffler. He's got a great skill set for this golf course. He's gaining across the board with all of his shots gained categories. You can see just a slight loser with the putter, but on POA has been a damn solid putter for his career. About a quarter of a stroke better per round with the flat stick on POA Anua, and now he finally gets off bent grass. Bent grass is like his Achilles heel. It's what has stopped Scottie Scheffler over his last 24 rounds. It's the reason why he's losing. Is if you guys remember, one of the reasons why we didn't play him last week were the bent grass splits, and now he finally gets to get over that. So if we take a look at his last 50 measured rounds, right, gaining close to half a stroke per round with the putting. That's what we expect from Scottie Scheffler. That's what we'd expect to see going forward. In fact, this measurement right here, where you're taking the POA and comparing it to your baseline, it's over his last 50 round baseline. So that's compared to a 0.47 shots gained per round. That means that Scottie Scheffler is gaining over, 0.72 shots gained putting per round on POA Anua. If he gets back to that, and he continues to hit the ball like he has, gaining over a stroke per round with the approach, gaining off the tee and around the green, book it. This guy's finishing in the top 5, if not winning this event, adding his 5th win of the year, second major championship. Would not blow my mind at all. So I haven't placed an outright bet on him. I don't think the value is really there yet. I saw 16 to 1 on him a few hours ago. Maybe we get him at like 17 and a half or 18 to 1. I end up firing on that number, but just seems like he's being slept on this week. and it's not warranted. I know the putting hasn't looked great, but that's because we were on bent grass. It's his worst surface. That's been well established for quite some time. We should have expected him to not putt all that well. So now that he gets that change of surface, again, I think the sky is the limit for Scottie Scheffler this week. Next up, we've got Dustin Johnson. And the only reason he's low owned this week, and he's a very, very affordable price tag at $9,400, is because he's playing on the Live Tour. People have this emotional response. They feel like he hasn't been playing serious golf for quite some time. Guys, the first Live a Golf event was last week, and he played on a PGA Tour event in the last month. He played at the PGA Championship. He's still in competitive shape. It's not like 1 week in the Middle East is going to make DJ not care about golf anymore, not care about this US Open, an event that he's won before. Why the hell is he going to be single-digit owned? It's just a pure psychology play. If people are going to avoid DJ because of his quote-unquote going to the Live Tour, then I'm all for it. I mean, honestly, he's probably been doing a lot of practicing. He's not been playing on the PGA Tour. Over there in the Middle East, he wasn't his best with his flat stick, but he was ball striking the crap out of it. His wedges were on point. The driver, outside of the first day, was pretty damn sharp. So if we're getting solid, ball striking Dustin Johnson, and then we get him on POA, where he's a much better putter than any other surface, I think the sky's the limit for him as well. So, we won at Oakmont. That's one of the comp courses that I'm using for this week at the US Open. He played pretty decently of late. I mean, obviously the shots gained metrics haven't been there. The finishes haven't really been all that great, right? Obviously 12th at the Masters, that's pretty decent. He missed the cut at the Heritage, so be it. Missed the cut at the PGA Championship, so be it, right? From a long-term sample size, he's a top 10 player in the world. And if people are just going to look at those last two PGA Tour performances, take a look at the fact that he's gone to Live Tour and completely write him off, so be it, right? Let DJ go out there and just storm the field. I mean, when Dustin Johnson has his game, he's unbeatable. We know this. We've seen this, 4 or 5 times over the last 3 years. When Dustin Johnson's firing in all cylinders and you don't have him in your player pool, I mean, you're drawing dead to the field. I remember at TPC Boston, I had 0% DJ that week, and he shot 30 under. He won by like 10 strokes or whatever it was. You don't want to be in that situation, particularly if he's single-digit owned. And that's always in the realm of possibility for a DJ. That's why I'm willing to take a lot more shots on DJ than I am on other players, particularly if he's 6.4% owned. So this is just a pure ownership play. Again, we don't have that much recent form to go off of, but he's not the only one here. There's quite a few players in this 9K range that haven't played all that much of late. So just identify some of them. Hideki Matsuyama, right, obviously had the DQ there. Down here, Brooks Koepka hasn't played much golf at all this year. Cameron Young has even taken a few weeks off. Towards the top of the board, I mean, Colin Morikawa took a pretty decent break there from the Byron Nelson. Same thing with Victor Hovland, right, just like 3 or 4 starts of late. DJ, right, he's still been a decent amount of starts, and now he's had the same type of breaks. He still played professional golf last week, and I know exhibition event, whatever you want to call it, over there in the Middle East, he was still at the least grinding on the range, still hitting golf shots. I think people are putting a lot more stock into that than they need to. And now lastly, for the last sleeper pick, we have Daniel Berger. And Daniel Berger, he has not been in the greatest of form, at least before the last 2 starts, but what we've seen since the PGA Championship is exactly what we'd expect from Daniel Berger. So the top, obviously missed the cut there. That's what I was talking about. So ever since then, top 25 finish, top 5 finish at the Memorial. So, very similar golf courses, all 3 of these venues, courses that I'm using as comps this week. So it is concerning that he missed the cut at the PGA, but perhaps he figured something out, right? He's somebody who was dealing with the back injury. Lower back injuries can be extremely concerning for golfers. And in general, at the Memorial, wasn't the greatest fit. He hadn't had all that much success at the Memorial over the years. So for him to finish top 5 was impressive, and it was majority due to his irons. Accuracy off the tee was there. His distance off the tee has kind of suffered since he's dealt with the injury, but he's been extremely precise. And those long irons at the Memorial were unbelievable. He was hitting those 175 to 200 yard shots better than pretty much everyone in the field, and putting the ball pretty much like he's used to. And the one thing we'll say about Daniel Berger is he's extremely streaky with the putting. So if we take a look at the stats of late, you'll see what I'm talking about. Extremely streaky. Right around a neutral there, right around a neutral with the irons. Same thing with off the tee and around the green. Positive end of that is that he's volatile in both directions. He goes out there, he'll gain 3-4 strokes putting any given week, lose 2-3 strokes putting the week after that, kind of cycle back and forth. But he tends to find those positive performances, at least in terms of volatility, on POA, where he's close to half a stroke better per round on the greens. He went out there, he won on the West Coast at Pebble. That comes to mind. A few other of those West Coast swing events, he's had plenty of ceiling performances. So assuming that he can putt well on these POA surfaces, assuming that he strikes the ball like he has over the last 2 weeks, I mean, this guy's being criminally underowned. I mean, Daniel Berger, when he's on a heater, is somebody that you want to ride. I mean, I remember one point in 2021, he had gained on approach in at least 16 straight events. I believe he made like 15 of those 16 cuts. And in terms of top 25s, I believe it was at least half of those starts were top 25s. So when you start to see this guy get it rolling, I mean, first off, the price tag is going to go up drastically if he has a really good performance this week, and you're going to start to see much higher ownership numbers on him. As is, he's extremely affordable. He's just priced higher than Sam Burns and Tony Finau, which are going to grab a majority of the ownership in this range. So you're certainly looking at single-digit ownership on somebody like a Daniel Berger. I mean, even the guy priced ahead of him, right? Matt Fitzpatrick is going to be mega chalk this week. So the guy that's sandwiched in between all three of these players, I mean, is just going to be completely overlooked. I mean, you could be looking at sub 5% owned Daniel Berger in some contest for this week. So for that reason, I have a lot of optimism in his game, because if he ends up hitting for us, I mean, it's going to be like hitting the nuts. No one's going to have him because of all these players. And for that reason, makes it an extremely high upside play. That's all I've got for this week's fades and sleepers. Before you hop on out of here, let me know in the comments who you're fading this week, and of course who your biggest sleeper pick is. We are going to have a weekly DFS live stream. It'll be tomorrow night, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure to stop on by with that with any questions that you have. We're going to be touching on the weather, strategy, my player pool, ownership, everything you need to know to get ready for this week. So make sure you stop on by for that. And always, make sure you like the video before you hop on out of here. And also, make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of that content when it drops in the future. Best of luck with all of your lineups for this week, everybody. And let's get this cash.